Surprise! It's not Brenda, it's me. The scriptures Dave read in the New Testament reading refer to John's recollection of Jesus clearing the temple during Passover. It lasted only 13 sentences in the Bible, but it was a very dramatic event. Jesus' first step into the world to start his ministry. It was a shocking time. I want to dramatize that for you in words. I've taken a little liberty with the details, but it's only 13 sentences. I had to make it longer. So let me set the stage first for the event. Let's talk about the world as it was in Jesus' time. There are many great names in Jewish history, but I want to talk in particular about three: Moses, King David, and Jesus. Moses led the Jews out of Egypt to the promised land, delivering God's chosen people. To me, that kind of begs the question: if the Jews are the chosen people, how come all the oil is under a rack in the rain? David was a strong army king. You recall David, when he was a young lad of 15 years old, took out his slingshot and slayed Goliath of the Philistines. He became pals with the king at that time, King Saul, who actually decided to make him his successor. King David conquered Jerusalem with a small army and ruled there over all Israel for 33 years. After that, his son Solomon ruled, and then Solomon's son ruled. Together they ruled for another 66 years. 100 years of the golden age of Israel. Then they were overrun back into servitude. It was prophesied, however, that a new king would come. The Christ, he would be called, and the Jews expected he would be a strong warrior and drive the Romans away and put Israel back in power. It's not going to happen that way. The Jews are under the control of the Romans. They pay taxes for everything they raise, they make, where they travel, what they eat, what they do. And they hate it. The Romans regard the Jews as a quaint but potentially dangerous religious faction. They probably should be allowed to worship as they please, so long as they don't threaten Rome's dominance. When threatened, the Romans quickly and violently squashed defiance. Beheadings, torture, stabbings characterize their method of government. They are the only government that uses crucifixion as the ultimate, cruelest public humiliation. They have teams of 5 Roman soldiers whose exclusive duty it is to go through crucifixion. The process involves capture of the prisoner, taking him to a courtyard, stripping him naked, tying him to a wooden post, and 2 men beat him with whips until he can barely stand. Then they march through the streets to the Golan Heights, where 3 permanent poles stand waiting for these criminals. They carry their own crosspiece to the site. Marching through the city to get there, are nailed to the crosspiece, hoisted on the cross, and left to die by exposure or suffocation. The temple itself in Jerusalem is controlled by the Pharisees and the high priests of the religion. They own all the concessions for the sacrificial doves, lambs, and calves. They must be certified pure exclusively by the high priest and used for sacrifice at the altar for the Seder purification dinner during the big Jewish holiday of Passover. They sublet those rights to various animal raisers and sheep herders who sell them to the Jewish people for sacrifice, and the priests get a cut on every sale. Only perfect specimens are allowed for sacrifice. The priests only perform the sacrificial killing upon the altar. Carcasses are then rushed to the campfires, or a stove if you're lucky enough to have a room or a place to stay, to be cooked. The pilgrims, most of whom have walked 5 to 10 days to get to Jerusalem to be purified during Passover, are a big crowd. Around 100,000 people travel to Jerusalem for the Passover feast. That's way more people than there are accommodations, which most of them can't afford anyway. They are camped out all around Jerusalem, all on the hills, and come into the temple during the day for the ceremonies. This trip and the week are a huge effort, but must be done for purification according to the religion. Sound like the Mormon or the Muslim Hajj that was just completed, where 2,000 people died in a stampede during the trip. The most hated part by the Jews of the event is the changing of money. Roman coins are the money of the land. However, the priests require that the gifts and sacrificial animals be paid for in shekels. Everybody remember the term shekels? Shekels have to be purchased from the money changers who set up their exchange tables in the temple. Since there's no other place to get it, the pilgrims are at mercy of the money changers' rate, which are arbitrary and downright robbery in most cases. The priests get a cut of every transaction, so they encourage high prices. All this buying and selling goes on inside the temple, a large structure with multiple rooms for religious teaching, for rooms for sacrifice and service, rooms for the priests, halls for discussions, and waiting areas for men and women to congregate. It took 35 years to build this biggest building in Jerusalem, which is now gone, and on whose site stands a mosque. Over time, its function as a religious center has merged with the commercial function of the sale of animals and shekels, all to the profit of the priests and the holy men who run it. The people hate it but can't do anything about it. They tried once to rebel, but Herod, king at the time, disguised his men in the crowd, and with swords they killed 600 militants. Rebellion doesn't seem possible. One man is about to change all that. Jesus, as a young man, doesn't go around with a halo on his head, and doesn't do much to promote his being the Son of God. The prophets have predicted the coming of Christ, and some signs point to that guy as going to be Jesus. He's very interested and amazingly well-versed in the Scriptures, as evidenced by his spending 3 days with the elders in the temple when he visited Jerusalem at age 12 with his parents during Passover. He reads with other young men in church, reads the Scriptures great, but he does not preach and he does not challenge the status quo. He is a carpenter, like and with his father Joseph. He has done that since he was 16 years old. He is now 30 years old and ready to start his ministry. The visit to this temple this time will be an act of civil disobedience that the Jews have long hoped to see as a sign of the coming of the Christ. He is a big, strong man. Big shoulders, big hands, strong arms, seasoned by manual labor hauling and lifting big beams for 20 years. In short, he's a pretty impressive physical specimen that nobody you want to mess with. Kind of picture the Terminator in a toga. At Passover, Jesus goes to Jerusalem and marches into the temple, straight to the money changers' tables. There are hundreds of Jews in line waiting to buy and trade for shekels. The big, heavy tables are covered with coins, scratched from many years' youth. Jesus walks straight to the table, grabs it underneath with his hands, and flips it up into the air, coins raining down upon the floor. And he doesn't stop. He flips all the tables forward, one at a time, coins flying. The money changers are stunned, as are all the Jews watching this amazing act of defiance. Jesus then heads for the animal pens, and with the cord whip he's carrying in his hand, drives the animals from the pens, and they run out into the hallway and out into the courtyards. Birds fly out the windows. People outside are going, "What the heck is going on in there?" The Roman guards were not in the room. They didn't know what happened until they saw all the commotion either. But since this was mostly a Jewish deal, they probably wouldn't interfere anyway. He then turns to the crowd and says, "Take all this away. Do not make my Father's house a marketplace." And walks out. Nobody moves. Nobody threatens him. Terminator in a toga. After he leaves the room, the money changers all jump up and start picking up their money. And the herders run out and scoop up their animals. And word travels immediately through all the temple to all the pilgrims. Did he just say, "My Father's house"? Could this be the Christ? I thought that was Jesus of Nazareth. He said, "My Father's house." Someone is finally here who is different, standing up to the changers. We must find out what goes on and who this guy is. So begins the ministry of Jesus Christ. He has 3 years to live. Fast forward to 2015, and the nomination rate for the 2016 presidential election is crowded and chaotic, or at least the Republicans are. This is either a great demonstration of the principles of democracy in the United States or some kind of cruel comedy where millions and millions of dollars get spent on traveling and advertising on TV. The Democratic side seems a lot for Hillary, who will make a historic run as the first woman to run for president. The Republican frontrunners are Trump, Carson, Bush, and Rubio, and anybody else you might like. The Kingdom Party has one person, Jesus. Jesus, though not a mainstream politician, has a great name recognition. Here's a man who has no money, no army, no party, really, no big political action committee, yet he is the most famous man in the world, and he could be the favorite. There are more books, more songs, more paintings of him than there are of anyone in history. And he looks mysteriously serene and handsome, except for those scars on his hands. He reminds some people of a throwback to the 60s, kind of a long-haired hippie guy with a message of peace, humility, charity, and love for all his fellow men, like Bruce running for president. The most vociferous Republican is Donald Trump, and he is somewhat like the Pharisees of Jesus' youth. He has wealth, property, airplanes, influence, all kinds of good things. He would love to trick Jesus into saying something that is unintentionally offensive. But Jesus has learned long ago not to get sucked into a verbal trap. He often answers a question with another question. He also tells parables to demonstrate his point, which his followers all love, because it's easy to understand those parables. They make sense, instead of the technical gobbledygook that the other guys are spouting out. Mr. Trump pounds on the immigration wall, and Jesus asks, how can we improve the lives of all our people, including our immigrants? Trump rails about taxation. Jesus said, is money the root of all good or of all evil? How can we make it do good? Trump would say he is strong and he'll stand up to Mr. Putin. Jesus wonders, maybe we should ask Mr. Putin how he could help us become better friends. Trump states he's a billionaire, doesn't need any PAC money, and will not be influenced in his decisions, therefore. Jesus says, is it richer to have faith than money? He's living proof. Well, all of this fantasy is fun to talk about, but probably not useful, because I don't think that Jesus would run for president. His is a religious mission to bring people to faith and belief in God that will bring them eternal life. He would want us to practice those virtues that he teaches us to use, not seek wealth and national dominance. He would like us to find our own potential, living a life that contributes to all around us. One does not need to be on a crusade to save the world. One needs to save himself and those you love. How do we do that in our everyday lives? By example. Create good whenever you can. Don't confront others with their problems. Try to be soft and listen to them and ease that burden. Don't go forth and try and save everyone. We should help those we know and make our own community a welcoming place. Learn to tolerate different issues and infirmities. This doesn't mean you sacrifice your own value system, nor that you provide a solution to everyone's problems. That's too much to do. Do what you can to make our little piece of the world better, and if everyone does that, it'll be better. Support good things. Be as good to all and generous as you can. Speaking of stewardship, this congregation does great good in this community. I could not participate in so many charitable causes were I not a part of it. I support the good efforts of all our energetic members who care about a whole diversity of things that I normally wouldn't think about. In turn, I work on things that they normally wouldn't think about, and us both working makes our mutual lives better. To be an active member of this church, to volunteer for different activities and give your hard-earned money is part of our mission to continue to do your part in making Mesa County a good place to live. So, remember to turn in your pledge card. Filled out. Be positive. The Lord helps those who help themselves. One of my favorite sayings. Your positive attitude affects everyone around you and makes your part of the world a good place to be. Take responsibility. We seem to live in a time when many people think that they're entitled. Nothing bad was ever their fault. Everything good is their destiny, whether they earn it or not. We need to be responsible for our own well-being and that of our family, which we created, and of our employees. If you're wrong, fix it. If you're right, pass it on. Be grateful. Do we not live in a wonderful place? There are so many disasters and terrible acts of violence in this country, and we're lucky enough to live in this land of beautiful landscapes, wonderful recreational opportunities, temperate climate, lots of nice people. I'm grateful for all that, and I'm grateful for all the many folks in this community and in this church who volunteer their time to try to govern, to create good works, and to fund charitable causes. I don't always agree with everyone, but I appreciate them trying and making that effort. To all of you in this room who make the effort for this church, thank you. Stay healthy. It takes 60 soldier years to realize that you're not immortal. That's an autobiographical statement. Dave told me the same thing. How we treat our bodies determines how we will live our golden years. Look at all these people in the choir who treated themselves so well they can walk up here and sing. Age is sneaky, but inevitable. Regardless of the advances in medicine, we're all going to get old, and we get a chance to meet Jesus up close and personal. Your health is your greatest treasure. Keep it close. Those are not exactly like the Ten Commandments. Those are some thoughts I had of how they work themselves down to commonsensical thoughts. Can't remember everything in the Bible. I can't, you can't. We don't study it that much. I particularly don't study it that much. But focusing on the things I find important make my life happy. St. Thomas Aquinas had an interesting theory about heaven, which I've decided to adopt. I like the way it goes, and it goes like this. If you lead a good and helpful life, you will spend eternity in heaven. If you don't believe in heaven and hell and lead a bad life, and you're wrong, you will spend eternity in hell. Bet on the good side. You'll have a better world, we'll have a better world for being here and being good, and there's no downside to being good because you're on the right side of the bet. There's no way, I guess, to really know the answer, how it'll turn out. But we're all going to find out someday. May we all be a credit to the human race. And when we go, find God standing tall and welcome us home. Amen.
Amen.